Lights, camera, action! Let's see, it's still February 28th. I had time to do one more movie for you. Let's see. This is going to be short story reading. And it's going to be 上級英語聞き取り. It's advanced English, or for my English native speakers out there, one hobby of mine is creative writing. So tonight I'm going to read a piece that I wrote that's in this anthology from Stanford Anthology for the summer youth program. Honestly, reading this, it kind of feels like like when I was writing it, I must have had an out-of-body experience or something, because it doesn't sound like something I would write. I usually write novels, not short stories, so it's really rare that I find something short enough that I can read on a YouTube video. As far as influences, I think maybe I was influenced by the book The Giver by Lewis Lowry, or maybe I was influenced by like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I think we had to read that for high school. We read the book Brave New World. And the title of this short story is Convenience. So I'll start. Are you ready to listen? Okay. Convenience by mautio. Somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, the rusty frame of my recycled bike groans as I pedal up the final mountain pass that leads to the compound. 3 days of near constant bike travel have brought me to where I am, but I am strong. I've made this journey to see my grandfather every year since I turned 12. Somehow, I feel this year may be the last. While I'm exhausted, he is more so. The very fact he may die soon snatches all the joy from going to visit him. Then, I see it, the protected mountain colony where he's been tucked away ever since the new order was put into effect, foreign and familiar all at once. Nostalgic memories of afternoons filled with enjoying the artifacts of the old way return to me. I recall video games, computers, cars, pictures of airplanes, packaged foods, aluminum cans of soda that release puffs of sound when you open them that can be discarded immediately after consumption. I pedal around to the gate of the protected compound, where I gain security clearance to enter. I pass a great parking lot where I see what I'd consider to be every type of motor vehicle ever invented, packed tight with everything from sleek minis to what my grandfather always referred to as the extinct land whale, its common classification, SUV. When I am away from this gleaming compound in the Rockies, I crave it more than anything. My land of rationed utilities and hut dwellings is not the same as the land of central air-conditioned two-story houses crafted of wood and sided in plastic. The word is as foreign as the place. I long to tell my friends about it, but have been sworn to secrecy, and consequently forced into isolation no matter how many people I am around. Our history curriculum begins after the world had already adjusted to the new order. The population is educated, but naive. Even I, with my grandfather who has imparted to me some of the old knowledge, am naive. He tells me it's been for my protection. I take off my helmet. I have arrived in the residential section of the compound where the roads are paved in asphalt, and yards have been carefully trimmed lawns. An element of nature's savageness has been stolen from this place, and yet what a wonderful thing it is to have the means to put nature into submission with fancy houses and personal cars. I walk up steps whose paint has been weathered by the winter snows and knock on the door. The can of paint beside the steps stands as a reminder that nothing here can be beaten by the weather for long. It is a house over 3 times the size of the hut I live in with my parents and sister, and yet only my frail grandfather and a single attendant live in it. This probably appalls the government officials, but they have no control over the fact that this haven was partitioned in the articles of the new order. A woman dressed in a bright dress suit of synthetic fibers opens the door. Yes, she asks, smoothing her dress with sets of pale fingers tipped with glossy red fingernails. Her eyes are curiously outlined in black, and pretty white powder fans up from the lines, illuminating the skin beneath her brows. Owen Allen, I say my name. Her face lights up with a glimmer of recognition. She beckons me in, and I enter my grandfather's world. This year, he isn't waiting for me in the entry. He's already dying, and with him the memories fading slowly like the echoes of a shout over a canyon. We enter a sitting room at the back of the house with big glass windows that overlook a tree-filled valley. He is sleeping peacefully in a rocking chair, wrinkled hands folded in his lap. A gentle breeze filters through a screen, tossing the frizzy white tuft of hair atop his head to and fro. When I think the attendant is about to leave, she walks over and shakes his shoulder lightly to rouse him from his slumber. "Mr. Allen, your grandson," she says. He blinks and I step toward him. He's so fragile with his papery skin, tired eyes, and stark white blanket pulled up to where his belly button might be. It's not the grandfather with the deep rolling laugh and the endless accounts of the old way that I remember. On the tray table beside the chair is a cup of water with a straw. I assume it is because his hands have become so shaky that he can no longer raise the cup to his lips without spilling it. The vivid blue of his eyes has become milkier with age. He blinks again, this normal movement dramatized by the papery wrinkliness of the skin around his eyes. I fear he has forgotten his invitation to me. "You invited him last week, Mr. Allen. Do you remember the letter we wrote together?" The nurse's eyebrows rise with her voice. I pull a chair before him and sit down, dropping my burlap bag of things onto the clean-swept floor, and the government mail vehicle stopped 5 days ago at my house, I say. They are the only motor vehicles the average citizen will ever see. Even the use of mail is strictly limited to those whose families are unrelated to the government. "Do you remember?" the nurse asks authoritatively. My grandfather looks down to his cup, and she raises the glass so that he can drink. He looks around the room with melancholy eyes and excuses the nurse from the room. He really did forget his invitation to me. "It's nice to see you," I say, changing the subject. I don't want him to feel embarrassed. He stares ahead. "Maybe. That's why you come so often," he says. It's a retort. For the past 2 years it's been the same. He forgets my visits and then complains that I never come. But there's too much to learn during this trip to argue. He looks through the windows to the valley. "I haven't painted an accurate picture of what was," he says. "There's so much about the old order you don't know. You know what all of them knew. You don't know what they didn't know. I ignored it," he says, reflecting on the valley forest and the one inside his weary mind. "But I know a lot about how many people there were. There was refrigeration and factories and cities with buildings bigger than this house. Like in New York, Paris, London, Tokyo, Beijing, the whole world glimmered with electricity at night. The old way was wonderful and free," I counter. His face twists up. He turns forward, hanging his head and is quiet. "No, you're wrong. It wasn't wonderful," he says, shaking his head suddenly, face directed downward. I feel tight inside. My grandfather's face is still seized with the burden of whatever he hasn't told me, but must release before it's too late. "Please explain," I say. He draws in a shuddering breath. "Start at the beginning." "Well," he pauses, "it was the height of the modern world, the old way. Everything in this country was just as it is in this compound. People lived this way, wasted this way, houses were big, vehicles were big. Other countries chose to modernize in the same way. They wasted in the same way. The countries that wasted the most did not create the most, well, as far as natural value. Everything you see here, it is all created, but not naturally. Convenience is not without its dark side. Plastics and metals, rubbers and chemicals, all of them poison to an extent. The poisoning of the earth and the minds of most was a minor price to pay for the conveniences of modern living. The world was not clean. People developed strange diseases, and with that it became apparent that nature itself was unhealthy. The earth was warmer then. Weather was unpredictable. People died during periods of unrelenting heat. The waters in the great oceans warmed as well. The great storms that strike the south became greater and greater. These storms tried to function as Earth's hands, God's hands, scratching at the surface in the only way they knew how, trying their best to scrape off some of the cities off the map so that the people might be warned. The world didn't listen. However, committees of people who noticed the trend and wanted to fight for the good of humankind and the future of this earth sprung up everywhere. And I was at the head of the greatest one in the nation. Eventually, similar groups in other nations gained status and followings. One especially rough year during which people died in masses, their lives choked off by foul pollution and extinguished by extreme heat and storms. A secret meeting was arranged in New York City for the serious supporters for change. There were 50 of us, scientists, politicians, those concerned, all crammed into a room in a skyscraper on the hottest day of the year in New York. Even with air conditioning and filtration, the room was stuffy and uncomfortable. We bickered and warred against each other. Days passed and there was no movement toward any agreement. So many believed the harm to the economic sector would be too devastating for any changes to be executed. Others believed there wasn't any time left and that any changes would have to be drastic and put into effect immediately. Mankind faced a great crossroads. One path would lead to economic despair and utter hopelessness among the people. The other would lead to complete extinction of man and the earth until it could eventually heal itself and show no sign of ever having coped with the plague the humans brought to it. The group was trying to decide which of the paths to follow. We made our decision a week after the debate began. It didn't take long compared to the days we spent arguing over which course to take. It was quick and easy, like jumping off a dock into a bitterly cold lake. And before we knew it, we were drafting the articles of the new order that all of today's nations must conform to. My grandfather finishes. The sun shines directly through the windows, casting a glow around his ghostly, apparition-like figure draped in white. My eyes tear up and I look down. I don't want to cry. I've been told too many things and know that my sole connection to understanding what happened will soon depart the world when he passes. His eyes close. I know he's very tired. I hope we made the right decision, he says, and mutters it a couple more times. I hope we made the right decision. I hope we made the right decision. His voice fading into sleepiness. The attendant has returned with a wheelchair and helps him into it. It's time for him to sleep, she asserts. I brush my fingers gently over the back of his hand before he's wheeled away, and then look over my shoulder to the empty rocking chair he's left behind. There is just a trace of movement, a reminder that there was once something special in that seat. He was in that seat. His mind, body, and soul was in that seat. The old way is the same. It has become a caricature in the minds of family members like me, who own only pieces of the puzzle in their minds and cannot see the full completed image, as my grandfather experienced. Even my parents don't know it and have no desire to. I ponder the decision that those 50 innovative people made so many years ago. My grandfather was one of the 7 living remainders from that meeting held on that most sweltering day near the fall of the old way. As I cross the room to a bookcase, I am sure of the path they chose. The bookcase is all journals, some from the old way, I know because my grandfather referred constantly to the pictures and the passages he'd drawn and written during his lectures. But I realize there are many others. I trace my finger along tightly packed rolls of journals, all marked and aligned in chronological order. I grab a stack of them carefully from the transition period that is left out of our school curriculum. The series I read is in no way related to those that tell sweet stories of machines that expel rainbow-colored gumballs. They tell of strife that came with adjusting after a complete upheaval of what the people of the era knew. My memories of video games, long, guiltless showers, and filling the garbage can with aluminum cans and plastic are no longer so charming. The world has changed, and I realize how fragile it is. I understand why I can never tell my friends about what was, and why my parents have no desire to know about it. They, too, think they could become tempted to return to the days of waste for the sake of convenience. Going back to that time would mean a return to great storms, the pollution, and the endless rush to own more than one's neighbor. My life in the valley is simple. I already know what job I will have. My days are filled with sunshine and conversation, hiking and swimming, learning and creating from nature without raping it. I stay up late that night at my grandfather's desk, reading beneath the luxury of a lamp that can be used legally more than 10 minutes, even though there is a clock in the house that could tell me when to turn it off. I run my fingers over the indentations of his strong handwriting, the mind-penetrating effect of his words mimicking it. When I'm satisfied, I close the books and sneak some of them into my bag before I sleep. That night, as my dreams shift from the glittering backdrop of nighttime city scenes to simple images of my family members sleeping in the hut back home, my grandfather passes. A funeral has been arranged in the compound, and rather than be put straight into the earth, he will be buried reverently beneath an intricately carved slab of stone, like the rest of those 50 who made the decision that saved the world. Later that day, I'm offered his life, his house, his standing, his everything. Those in charge of the compound want it to stand forever as a museum, but I cannot accept. When evening falls, I put on my helmet and I walk my bike once more through the compound that has every convenience a person from the valley could ever dream of. With my back to the setting sun, I take a deep breath and begin an easy downhill journey to my valley paradise. The end. So that was from, when did I write that? I wrote that in 2006. Yeah, in a wonderful group. I think I still have some of these people as Facebook friends, and a few of at least one of them is a published author now. It was from a creative writing camp. Right, it's all fiction. It's just it really gives me chills though, because yeah, my grandfather passed away a year after I wrote it. But it's all fiction, right? I hope you enjoyed that. For my Japanese friends, it's probably difficult. I have some creative writing friends, so I wonder if my creative writing friends can tell me what they think about that. Alright, thank you for listening. Good night, everybody. Good night from Oregon, USA.